I'll be teaching you about hepatic encephalopathy. So first of all, what is encephalopathy? Encephalopathy, the meaning of encephalopathy is generalized dysfunction. Okay, so there is generalized dysfunction of brain. It's called encephalopathy. Okay, this generalized dysfunction can be bacterial infection, it can be because of some metabolic problem, it can be because of some toxins or drugs. Okay, so anything which is causing dysfunction of neuron is called encephalopathy. Okay, then if it is caused by problem in the liver, okay, or if it is the encephalopathy, if we are saying that attributing encephalopathy because of the liver problem, we will call it as hepatic encephalopathy. So liver problem leading to generalized dysfunction of brain is called hepatic encephalopathy. So I hope now you would understand that hepatic encephalopathy is nothing but generalized dysfunction of brain as a result of problem in the liver. So usually it is one of the complication of acute liver failure. So before going to encephalopathy, we will first understand the definition of acute liver failure. So the definition of acute liver failure is any disease or acute liver injury, or you can say biochemical evidence of acute liver injury in the form of rise in OT, SGOT, rise in SGPT or bilirubin. So these are the biochemical evidences, okay, or rise in ammonia levels. Okay, so any biochemical evidence of acute liver injury which is less than 8 weeks duration. Okay, anything beyond 8 weeks is subacute. Okay, and then if it is beyond 6 weeks, 6 months, that is chronic. So first definition is it should be an acute complication or acute liver injury. So acute liver injury which is evidenced by your biochemical parameters, which is SGOT, PT, bilirubin, etc. PT, INR. Then second, there is no evidence of chronic liver disease. There is no evidence of chronic liver disease means what? Chronic liver disease lead to decrease in synthetic function in the form of decrease in albumin. So your albumin should be normal. Okay, because in chronic liver disease, albumin is going to be low. So there should not be any hyperalbuminemia. There should not be any ascites or capitmedusa, or there are any of the evidence of chronic liver disease in the form of severe vitamin deficiency, short stature, okay, nutritional anemia. So all these manifestations should not be there, which is pointing towards chronic liver disease. Or one more thing is the KF ring in the retina around your iris. So KF ring around the iris is an indicator of Wilson disease, which is a chronic disease. So there should not be any evidence of chronic liver disease. So most common evidence what we see in chronic liver disease is the ascites, hyperalbuminemia, the firm, hard liver, okay, or when the duration is more than 6 months. So that and all are evidences of chronic liver disease. So we must rule out chronic liver disease to be called it as a case of acute liver failure. Okay. Then the third would be, and which is very important, is prothrombin time or PT INR more than 1.5 with evidence of hepatic encephalopathy. Okay, so PT INR more than 1.5 with hepatic encephalopathy or PT INR more than 2 without hepatic encephalopathy. So when you have INR more than 2 and there is no manifestation of hepatic encephalopathy, this would still be a case of acute liver failure. So this is how you are going to define acute liver failure. This is a very simple definition. Acute biochemical evidence of acute liver injury. What do you mean by acute? The duration should be less than 8 weeks. Okay. So any injury in the liver of less than 8 weeks duration. Second is there should not be any evidence of chronic liver disease in the form of hypoalbuminemia, short stature or anemia or ascites or hard liver or so on and so forth. Okay. Then third is prothrombin time more than 1.5 with evidence of hepatic encephalopathy. performant or PT-INR more than 2 without evidence of encephalopathy. Because encephalopathy has given an overage. So if encephalopathy has come, which means even with 1.5 we can label it as acute liver failure. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Now we will go to the discussion of hepatic encephalopathy. So encephalopathy is a liver disease or liver infection. Okay, so most commonly hepatic encephalopathy, what we see in children is secondary to acute infections. The most common cause being infections. What are the infections which causes? Any infection which is causing liver damage can cause hepatic encephalopathy. So we are talking about the etiology basically. So when we talk about etiology, basically any etiology which is causing liver damage or acute liver failure is going to cause hepatic encephalopathy. So whatever is the risk factor for acute liver failure is ultimately a risk factor for hepatic encephalopathy. First and foremost is infection. You don't need to remember every time, you will just see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then when we talk about infection, again bacterial. Okay, any bacterial infection, severe sepsis can cause hepatic encephalopathy. Then you have malaria, parasitic infection, malaria, dengue can cause encephalopathy. Malaria and dengue are very common cause of encephalopathy, which we see every day in ICUs. Okay. Then viral infections, HSV, EBV, okay, etc. and dengue virus. Okay, so that all can cause hepatic encephalopathy. Dengue will come here in viral illnesses. Okay. Leptospira can cause hepatic encephalopathy. Among the bacterial causes, leptospira can cause encephalopathy. So these are the causes of infectious causes of hepatic encephalopathy. Then second would be metabolic causes. So metabolic causes, among the metabolic causes, obviously in one order of metabolism. Okay, for example, mitochondrial encephalopathies. Okay, mitochondrial illnesses can cause encephalopathy. Then urea cycle defects. Urea cycle defects can cause encephalopathy as a result of increasing ammonia, etc. Okay, then organic acidemia, etc. Then drugs. Drugs can cause encephalopathy. Most commonly paracetamol poisoning. ECM poisoning can cause acute liver failure and that can cause thereby the encephalopathy. So paracetamol, and then you have other drugs. Okay, so and any drug which is basically metabolized in liver, especially antipsychotic drugs, when they are taken in extra doses, or any drug which is taken for sedation. For example, usually the grandparent used to take sleeping pills, okay, clonazepam, etc. That if coincidentally child takes, then it can cause drug-induced hepatic injury and then encephalopathy. So drugs, metabolic infections are the most common causes of hepatic encephalopathy. And then the others are toxic and traumatic. So traumatic is very less. Toxic is again any toxin which is affecting the liver first. Okay, or any toxin which is going to metabolize in the liver and that can cause liver damage. Okay. So these are the common causes of encephalopathy. We are not discussing the causes of encephalopathy. We are discussing causes of acute liver failure. Because anything which can cause liver failure can ultimately lead to hepatic encephalopathy. All patients of acute liver failure will not land up into encephalopathy. There are very selective patients. Okay, almost 30 to 40% of acute liver failure cases they present in the ICU with hepatic encephalopathy. So now the recording has started. Now we discuss about the pathogenesis of hepatic encephalopathy. So this is about etiology, very easy to remember. Just remember infectious, metabolic, toxins and drugs. Okay, just remember one example of each group and then over. Etiology is over. So now coming to the pathophysiology, which is very important. Okay, before clinical manifestation, this pathophysiology is very important. If you understand pathophysiology, then it is very easy for you to remember the clinical manifestation and again to remember the treatment protocol. So pathophysiology. As you all know that this is your liver. Okay, this is your GIT system. This is your portal hepatic circulation. Okay, and this is your common bile duct. Okay, so what are the function of liver? function of liver. So liver synthesize. The basic function of liver is synthesis. Synthesis of various protein, complex carbohydrate, glycogen. Okay, and then coagulation factor. So synthesis of protein, complex protein, carbohydrate, glycogen, and then coagulation factors. Coagulation factors synthesizes, and among the protein, the most important being albumin, which is responsible for your osmotic pressure. Okay, so albumin is very important, which is being synthesized. Coagulation factor is very important, which is synthesized, and then it synthesizes, and then many vitamins, also vitamin, all the lipids, because it synthesizes lipid. So lipid, protein, complex carbohydrate are being synthesized in the liver only. Okay, we get nutrition from here, and then the actual form which is circulated in the circulation, that will actually be synthesized over here. Okay, so thereby lipid, protein, carbohydrate synthesis happens in the liver. Then other than this, coagulation factor, then vitamin A, D, E, A, all lipid soluble vitamins are being stored in the liver. Okay, and then other than synthetic, it also does what? It detoxify what? Detoxify ammonia, which is liberated from the bacteria, which is liberated from the synthesis of in the process of synthesis of protein. Ultimately ammonia being synthesized. So detoxification of ammonia by urea cycle. So urea cycle happens in the liver only. Okay, so ammonia enters in the urea cycle, and then this urea is being liberated and get excreted into the urine. Right? So the liver does synthesis function, detoxify, and then it is a storage area for multiple vitamins. Okay, so synthesis, storage, and detoxification of especially ammonia. These are the main function of liver which are going to be affected whenever there is a liver injury. Okay, so definitely whenever if the patient is having hepatic encephalopathy or any kind of liver injury, that this function is going to get affected. So how it is going to manifest in the patient? So because of coagulation dysfunction. See, albumin is stored, lot of store is already there in the albumin. So this is going to get affected very late. Almost it takes 6 months for the manifestation of low albumin in the blood. And so that is why we say hypoalbuminemia is one of the feature of chronic liver disease, but not an acute liver disease. But this coagulation factor, because their half-life is very short, hardly varying from say 7 hours in factor 7 to 6 to 7 days in many of the factors. So definitely this is going to get affected. Anything which is lasting for lesser period of time, definitely they are going to get affected. Acute liver failure patient will not come to you for short stages because they have enough of lipid, enough of protein, which can be a source of metabolism for another few months. So definitely the manifestation of all these things are going to come very late. That's why I said short stature is a late manifestation, hypoalbuminemia and edema is a late manifestation, but coagulation dysfunction is an acute manifestation of acute liver disease. So that is why they present to you with bleeding. So bleeding from various sides due to the deficiency of coagulation factor is one of the main manifestation. Then again, vitamin A, D, E, K, again this is again a feature of chronic liver disease. Why this is a feature of chronic liver disease? Because again you have enough storage of all these vitamins. Okay, so they are not going to come to you with rickets or with white out spots and all those things. So that and all again is a feature of chronic liver disease. But coagulation dysfunction is a feature of acute liver failure. Then one more thing which is very important is detoxification of ammonia. Ammonia is such a molecule which can circulate any part of your body. It is freely movable. Ammonia is going to cross all the barriers. Okay. So once ammonia enters, because there is no detoxification, there is no urea cycle. So ultimately this ammonia is going to enter into the IVC. Right? Once it enters into the IVC, it is going to get circulated through heart, all your peripheral tissue and especially brain. Got it? So ammonia, if it enters into the brain, blood-brain barrier is absolutely permeable for ammonia. Okay, so this ammonia is going to get accumulated in the liver. See, this is the main pathophysiology of your hepatic encephalopathy. So I am going to tell you this in detail. I want to understand the difference between the manifestation in acute liver disease and the manifestation in chronic liver disease. So now we talk about the hepatic encephalopathy because of increasing ammonia in your blood. So what happens when ammonia goes up in your blood? Basically, this is your brain cell. Consider this as your big brain cell. There are two types of cells. Jyoti, see here. This is your excitatory neuron and this is your inhibitory neuron. Right? So take it as your please concentrate on this pathophysiology. This is very, very important. So this is your excitatory neurons and this is your inhibitory neurons and this is your astrocytes. So ammonia through blood, this is your blood-brain barrier. What is the peculiarity of blood-brain barrier? It has got tight junction, so it does not allow many of the molecules to pass through the vessels into the brain cells. Okay, but here ammonia has crossed the blood-brain barrier, enters into the astrocyte. See, because astrocyte is again a cell which is going to detoxify all these toxins which are circulated in the blood. Before it allows them to enter into the brain and suddenly cause so much of damage, astrocyte function comes into play. So this is the astrocyte. What this astrocyte is going to do? This astrocyte is going to detoxify ammonia to a certain extent, but it is not going to do that because it is not meant for doing it. So ammonia which has come into the astrocyte is going to cause astrocyte swelling. So there will be swelling of astrocytes. So this is one phenomena. So there is swelling of astrocyte. Jyoti. So this swelling, and one more thing is because of the cellular swelling there is cerebral edema. There are multiple reasons for cerebral edema. This is one of the reasons. Okay. Another reason is it is also going to damage the mitochondria. So there is damage to the mitochondria. And what happens when there is damage to mitochondria? What is the function of mitochondria? What is the function of mitochondria? It is a powerhouse of cells. So it is going to give you ATPs. So when ATP is lacking and the brain requires continuous supply of glucose. So there is glucose consumption by alternative pathway. So what it is going to do? The glucose is going to enter into the glycolysis and there will be formation of lactate. Lactate is going to cause tachypnea. Okay, so there will be tachypnea in these patients because of increased lactate. There is no generation of energy from a powerhouse. So there has to be alternative source of energy. So that alternative source of energy is lactate. But the lactate is going to cause tachypnea. It is going to cause acidosis. Right? So this is again causing further damage to the brain cells. Okay. So again there is cellular swelling. One more thing. Again there is because of the cellular swelling, because of all these phenomena, the blood-brain barrier is going to get disrupted and it is going to be more permeable for many other toxins. So all the toxin gets access to the brain, which is going to cause damage to the astrocytes. Okay. So this is the reason for cellular swelling and edema. So again we repeat it. Astrocyte ammonia is going to cross blood-brain barrier because it is going to enter into the astrocyte, going to cause swelling of the astrocyte, and then damage to the mitochondria, no supply of energy, alternative supply through lactate. Lactate is going to cause tachypnea and going to cause acidosis. So this is how it is going to cause cellular swelling. Then one more thing. Ammonia is helpful in two things. One, glutamate, excitatory and inhibitory neuron. Both sides there will be entry of glutamate. Now, in presence of ammonia, this glutamate is going to convert into glutamine, and this glutamine is going to be liberated into the astrocytes again. Here in inhibitory neuron, there will be excretion of GABA. So what is GABA? Gamma aminobutyric acid. So GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and glutamate, Jyoti, Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. Okay. One more peculiarity is glutamate is again going to enter into the astrocyte, and glutamate, and because there is excess of ammonia, so there will be imbalance between glutamate and GABA. This imbalance between these two is basic reason for all the manifestation of hepatic encephalopathy. So for example, if we take it like this, so this side we have excitatory neurotransmitter and this side we have inhibitory neurotransmitter. So when there is an imbalance between these two, they are going to have abnormalities in your day-to-day function. Okay, when excitatory is more, as in case of initial stage of liver failure, and glutamate is more, the patient is going to have altered sleep pattern, abnormal behavior, and then when they enter into stage 2, then it will be abnormal behavior, they will be aggressive, okay, they don't listen to you, they will be confused. Later on, when all the glutamate storage is gone, when GABA comes into action, when GABA is more in function, this GABA is going to cause deeper coma. Okay, so stage 3 and 4 is because of more increased level of inhibitory neurotransmitter. Stage 1 and 2 is because of increasing excitatory neurotransmitter. Okay, so stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 1 there will be altered sleep pattern. Stage 2 confused or disoriented. They are drowsy and disoriented. Here they are stuporous and here they are comatose. So as the encephalopathy worsens, the level of inhibitory neurotransmitter goes up, excitatory goes down, because there is a limit of glutamate to, because glutamate is being synthesized from not only with ammonia, there is role of glucose as well. So when the glucose goes down, when everything goes down, your excitatory neurotransmitter goes down and inhibitory neuron goes up. Okay, so because of the dysregulation between these two, the child is going to manifest various type of symptoms. One more thing is, initial phase of encephalopathy, glutamate is again a neurotransmitter which is responsible for seizure activity. It is seizurogenic. So there will be seizure in the child. Okay, and basically the toxins which are transmitted through blood-brain barrier are going to get accumulated in the basal ganglia. That is why they have asterixis, flapping tremors. They have this kind of tremors. So flapping tremors and ataxia and all these manifestations you usually have because of the accumulation of the toxins in the basal ganglia. Okay, and that is why they are going to have asterixis. Okay, hyperreflexia because of generalized dysfunction of cortex. They have hyperreflexia and upgoing planters. Okay, so this is the basic pathophysiology of hepatic encephalopathy. So everything is happening because of ammonia. So ammonia which is crossing the blood-brain barrier, entering into the cerebral CNS and entering the astrocyte, going to cause swelling in the astrocytes. And one more thing it is going to cause is dysregulation of blood flow to the brain. Okay, so there is increased dysregulation, there is increased blood flow, and then increased blood flow is again going to worsen the raised intracranial tension. Now few words about, I am not going to delete this because this is very important diagram, you must understand this. Okay, so GABA, glutamine, ammonia, you have to remember this cycle. Okay, for pathophysiology. So one more, we will repeat it again after this. So the child is going to be stuporous and comatose. Okay, this is the late stage of hepatic encephalopathy. Late stage. And when there is early stage, in early stage, the patient is going to be hyper alert. There is altered day-night sleep pattern. He never sleeps. He is irritable. Then if it worsens, he will be drowsy. And then stuporous and comatose. So this is a vicious cycle. Like this, it goes on and on and on. Okay, so now we will come to, this is about pathophysiology of hepatic encephalopathy. First is bleeding manifestation because of defective coagulation function or coagulation dysfunction. Then there will be various type of CNS manifestation because of disturbance between excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitter and raised intracranial tension, raised intracranial pressure. Okay, as you all know that cerebral perfusion pressure is dependent on two things: mean arterial pressure and intracranial pressure. Cerebral, what is cerebral perfusion? Perfusion to the brain cells, especially the parenchymal cells of the brain. So cerebral perfusion pressure is basically dependent on mean arterial pressure and intracranial pressure. Okay, so intracranial pressure, if this pressure goes up and if this is constant, obviously your cerebral perfusion pressure is going to decrease. Okay, because this is negatively related, minus ICP. So more the intracranial pressure, lesser will be cerebral perfusion pressure. So in order to maintain this cerebral perfusion pressure, the body is going to compensate by increasing the blood flow to the brain. Okay, or it's trying to increase the mean arterial pressure. Okay, to some extent. But when the compensatory mechanism fails, your all the reserve catecholamines are over, this is going to fall down, and ultimately cerebral perfusion pressure is again going to fall down. And when there is dysregulation of these two, definitely CP is going to go up and up and up. And this is going to cause severe damage to the brain parenchymal cell. This may cause herniation and this may cause death. So basically the reason for death are two things: continuous rise in intracranial pressure, and second is the diffuse bleeding. Anywhere the child can bleed. So bleeding can worsen and can cause death. Okay, so these two are basically the main cause of mortality. Okay, so this is about pathophysiology of hepatic encephalopathy. So when the question comes, you need to remember all the function, acute liver function, acutely, what are the functions which are acutely going to get affected, and what are the reason for rising intracranial pressure. So basically cellular swelling, okay, because of damage to the astrocyte, and then dysregulation of dysregulation of blood flow to the brain, then alteration in cerebral perfusion pressure, then there is disturbance in excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitter. So these are the main causes of manifestation of hepatic encephalopathy. So I don't think that I need to tell you about clinical features of hepatic encephalopathy. We have already discussed. Just to brief you, and I don't think it is difficult for you now to remember what are the clinical manifestation of acute liver failure. First thing, you should have acute history. Okay, so the child can have manifestation of acute liver failure in the form of jaundice. So they can have jaundice is not mandatory to be called a patient as a case of acute liver damage. Please remember, because in cases of toxic, in cases of metabolic damage, in cases of various infection, they are not going to affect the bile duct system. Okay, so basically your liver is made up of hepatocytes and canaliculi. So when there is diffuse damage to the parenchyma, then only the bile duct is going to get affected. So there are few infections which affects the biliary canaliculi. There are few things which affects your parenchyma. So the drugs and metabolites, obviously anything which is going to get accumulated or going to get toxified in the liver parenchyma is going to affect your liver cell function first. So that is why there is no rise in bilirubin level, or there is no evident jaundice. Why? Because your duct system is not affected. Duct system is going to get affected in the last stage. So the child can even present to you in an early stage. That's why the rise in bilirubin or jaundice cannot be the mandatory thing to be called a patient as a case of liver disease or acute liver failure. Okay, this is not a mandatory thing. Whereas in hepatitis B virus infection, hepatitis C virus infection, or in cases of acute infection, A infection, E infection, there can be jaundice because the virus directly affects your biliary canaliculi. That is why they have jaundice first. Okay, before they have parenchymal damage, they have both diffuse damage to the parenchyma and bile duct. Okay, drugs and metabolites especially affect the parenchyma. That's why they don't manifest as jaundice or rising bilirubin level. So jaundice is not at all mandatory to be called a patient as a case of acute liver failure hepatic encephalopathy. Second, since it is an acute illness, so definitely there is liver enlargement. Okay, so there is hepatomegaly. So jaundice, hepatomegaly, and then bleeding manifestation, of patients with hepatic encephalopathy. There can be evidence of acute infection. Okay, like in cases of malaria, dengue, you have fever, history of fever preceding the illness. Okay, so there can be history of fever or ingestion of any drug. For example, paracetamol taken in large amount. Okay, more than 150 or 1.5 gram per kg per day. Okay, so increased intake or huge intake of paracetamol or any other toxins. Okay, so drug and toxin injections in large amount. Okay, so these can be the preceding factors. Okay, jaundice, hepatic enlargement, bleeding manifestation are very common symptoms of hepatic encephalopathy, and then there can be altered sensorium. Altered sensorium in the form of drowsiness or decreased alertness or sleep pattern abnormality or confusion or coma or incoherent speech or so on and so forth. Whatever abnormal brain, abnormal altered sensorium you remember, you can write. Drowsiness, stuperousness, incoherent speech, inappropriate behavior, altered behavior or coma. So you can write everything. Okay, so altered sensorium. These are the common manifestation of or common clinical symptoms of hepatic encephalopathy or acute liver failure. Okay. Now, how do you classify encephalopathy? So we classify encephalopathy in four stages. Okay. I am just going to tell you in short. Stage, I have already explained you stage 1, 2, 3, 4. Just going to brief it. In one word, if you remember stages, then just remember these three words. In altered sleep pattern, the reason being increased excitatory neurotransmitter at this stage. Stage 2 will be drowsiness or disorientation. Stage 3 is stuporous but arousable. They are arousable. When you call them deeply, they will respond to you. Then stage 4 we will further divide into 4A and 4B. 4A is responsive to pain. They are still responsive to deep pain. And they are unresponsive. Even number. No response to anything. Okay. So this is how we divide the stage. Very easy, very simple. Okay, so we'll just finish off fast. I'll just take 5 minutes, 5 more minutes. So one is altered sleep pattern, drowsiness, stuporous and comatose. Okay, and then on EEG also you can divide in stage 1 normal, alpha waves. Then you have or generalized slowing. Okay, so you can have various manifestations or various stages classified on the basis of clinical pattern and age. Okay, so this is about the classification of hepatic encephalopathy. About treatment. Treatment is very easy. Supportive care in the form of, if the patient is unconscious, ABC again, maintain airway, breathing, circulation. Okay. Then 5 things which is very important in a patient with hepatic encephalopathy is normal glucose level. Okay. Because brain is isolated glucose utilizer. Because that's why we need to have continuous supply of glucose. So glucose, and there is no source of glucose. Liver is not functioning, so they cannot synthesize glucose from glycogen. So you need to monitor glucose 4 hourly, and we need to supplement whenever there is hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia can worsen liver failure and encephalopathy. Okay. Normal electrolyte, definitely sodium, potassium, everything, calcium, all these things should be normal. And then temperature regulation, you need to check the temperature. Fever, if there is associated sepsis, then please treat sepsis first, because again it is going to cause increased lactate and worsening of encephalopathy. So normal electrolyte, normal acid-base balance, acidosis, there should not be any acidosis or alkalosis. So normal acid-base balance. So in any form of severe disease or critical disease, this is not just for hepatic encephalopathy, this is for any kind of encephalopathy or any kind of encephalitis. Normal glucose, normal temperature, normal electrolyte, normal acid-base balance. Okay. whenever I get time, I am going to teach you the values or the importance of all these factors. So all these things should be normal. Okay. If anything is abnormal, it is going to worsen the symptoms of encephalopathy. A patient may land up into at a faster rate from stage 1 to stage 4. Okay. Control of seizure. Second is control of seizure. In hepatic encephalopathy, the supportive management plays a vital role, because you can say 50% of encephalopathy patients just with the supportive care. There is no specific treatment of hepatic encephalopathy if you don't know the cause. Okay, and then identification of cause and treatment of same. For example, if it is malaria, treat malaria. If it is some herpes simplex infection, treat with acyclovir. Bacterial infection, treat with antibiotic. So identification of cause, drug injection, paracetamol, poisoning and all, then treat with NSAID. So specific treatment if you know the cause. So identify the cause of poisoning which is causing rising ammonia level. So dialysis. So identification of cause and treatment of that particular thing. Then specific management. This is about specific management based on the cause. Then lactulose is very important, because lactulose is going to increase the motility of GIT, and whatever ammonia is there in the GIT is going to get excreted, and it is going to cause increased GI transit time. So that's why, and we don't want ammonia to be accumulated with the GI system. There are two sources of ammonia. One is because patient is kept MBM, so there is no source of generation of ammonia. Only source is your GI microbiota. So we have to suppress that microflora by adding rifaximin. So rifaximin to be added to suppress the gut microflora to decrease the production of ammonia. Because we already saw that ammonia is the main factor for all these symptoms. So definitely main purpose is to suppress this ammonia. So lactulose for increasing transit time. And one more thing lactose does is what? It makes the environment of GIT acidic. So acidic environment, when you give H plus ion to ammonia, it is going to bind with ammonia and going to produce NH4, which is non-soluble, which is just getting excreted through your GIT system itself. So if you combine hydrogen ion with ammonia, it is going to form ammonium ion. So NH4 is not going to cause all these complications. So this is another role of lactulose. Lactulose is very important. Okay. Then third is LONE. L-ornithine and aspartate. As you know, ornithine, aspartate has a role in urea cycle. So basically, we are helping to detoxify ammonia through alternative pathways. So whatever function, whatever amount of parenchyma is left in the liver, we are going to supplement with L-ornithine and aspartate, and we are going to cause the excretion of ammonia through alternative pathways. Okay. So LON is very important. So these are the three specific supportive measures which we need to do in such patients. Okay. So again, just to combine everything, I just give you, can just take your 5 minutes to combine everything. What is encephalopathy? Encephalopathy is a complication of acute liver failure. Correct? Generalized dysfunction due to liver disease. Then causes infectious metabolic drug toxins. Okay. Over pathophysiology, main thing is liver is not functioning. Storage synthetic functions are affected. Many things are being stored for long period of time, so they are not the manifestation of acute liver failure. But coagulation factor half-life is very less, just 7 days. That is why they present with bleeding manifestation. Then detoxification function. Ammonia is going to detoxify in the liver, which is not happening in acute liver disease or acute liver damage. Ammonia is accumulated, crosses blood-brain barrier, enter into the astrocyte, causes astrocyte swelling. Dysregulation or imbalance of excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitter. Excitatory goes up, child will have altered pattern, confused, disoriented, stuporous, and then seizures. Okay, basically, and then increased intracranial tension because of the cellular swelling, because of the dysregulation of cerebral blood flow, because of again decrease in mean arterial pressure in the later stage. The child is going to go into coma because of this persistently increasing intracranial pressure. So the increased intracranial pressure and the ammonia and the dysregulation between these two excited neurotransmitter is the main reason for all the symptoms of hepatic encephalopathy. Okay, clinical manifestation very easy: jaundice, fever, jaundice, hepatomegaly, bleeding manifestation, and any underlying factor which is going to be responsible for liver dysfunction and altered behavior. Classification I have already told you. Altered sleep pattern. Then altered sleep pattern. Second is inappropriate behavior. Third, stupor. Fourth, coma. ठीक है. In AB, A responsive to pain, 4B, no response to pain. EG, abnormal generalized slowing for nothing. Okay, asterixis is seen in stage 2 and 3. 4, no asterixis, completely flat line. Even unresponsive patient. Okay, EG, normal. So, 1 is relatively normal, 4 is last stage. Okay, no hope. 50% can survive just with supportive care. Treatment involve identification of cause, treatment of particular cause, ABC, main measure, and then regulate glucose, regulate electrolytes, maintain acid-base balance, and then last but not the least, 3 important things which need to be added in these patients: lactulose for increased GI transit time, then ammonia, okay, so conversion of ammonia into ammonium which can be excreted. Second is rifaximin to suppress gut flora, to suppress the synthesis of ammonia, and then LOLA, L-arnitine, L-aspartate for alternative cycle of ammonia. Okay, so these are the main treatment for patient with acute liver failure or hepatic encephalopathy. So this is all about hepatic encephalopathy. Prognosis is 50% when you give good supportive care and when you identify the cause on time. Okay, at time dialysis is also required when ammonia is very, very high in drug metabolic causes. So if you do that well, child may survive. Okay, so most important, specific treatment and identification of cause and identification of whatever been happening which can cause ongoing damage to the liver. Okay, for example, metabolic diseases. If you don't identify on time, it is going to cause again and again liver damage. For example, mitochondrial diseases. So that's about hepatic encephalopathy. Okay. Any question you can write down on WhatsApp and answer this question.